I'm not going to mute everybody, but if people start talking or making background noise or Supreme Court SCOTUS toilet flushes, maybe I'll need to do that. So, the survey. Yeah, that was it. Okay. So quick little run through of this. So we've got 72% are Central Ohio. We got a couple people not in the Columbus area, 5 people outside. So that's a nice little distribution. On the COVID front, it's good to know people are managing to get through. Nobody says they're not doing well at all. So we've got the majority in the managing but not loving it. And then we've got the loyal attendees. We've got 7 first-timers attending for the first time virtually. Pretty sure there's an overlap with, I know Thomas Busselubbock's never been to a Columbus Web Analytics Wednesday, so that's at least one. So welcome, everyone. My name's Tim Wilson, and this is, I think, our 11th year of Columbus Web Analytics Wednesdays. And we've had to shift to go virtual. So we're trying to figure out how to make that work. We've got always when we're in person, the food and the drink is provided by sponsors, and we're even finding ways to productively put the sponsors' funds to use in this virtual world, which we will get to in just a minute. So our sponsors, we've always had sponsors. They've always been free or at least heavily subsidized. Our sponsors for 2020 are Team Builder Search, which is based here in Central Ohio. If you're having a problem finding the right digital talent for your team, then contact Team Builder Search. They specialize in hard to find digital talent for full-time and contracting roles. We've got Clarivoy, who is based in Rev 1, where we are when we are in person and will hopefully be someday again. They're the auto industry's most trusted source of truth for marketing campaign optimization. We've got InfoTrust, which is an end-to-end digital analytics consulting, data governance, and technology company. Their founders started the company knowing one thing: they wanted to build the best place to work, and everything else would fall into place. Their clients, the industry, their employees, and their community feel the rippling effect of their passion and are looking for more amazing people to join them. We have an amazing speaker coming up later this year from there. And they have an office in Cincinnati, and they have they have a handful of people. No, they actually have opened an office in Columbus as well, a small office. So those are our sponsors. So thanks to them. And there's a cute dog to thank them. So we're doing something. I mentioned that we're trying to make sure we're using since we are making no money as organizers of this. So not that we're looking to gratuitously spend money, but we had the idea that we could actually use the Columbus Web Analytics Wednesday community to hopefully help out a good cause, which during this whole COVID-19 mess that we're living through there, we all know unemployment and all sorts of people are struggling. So the Mid-Ohio Food Collective, formerly the Mid-Ohio Food Bank, we've actually got a page set up with them. We've gotten approval from our sponsors to match donations up to a total of $1,000. So far, and we'll keep promoting this probably at least through the end of this month. So probably send emails, but if you're inspired I will probably drone on just long enough for you to ignore me, hop over there, give 10, 20, 30 bucks. That will be doubled through the generosity of our sponsors. If you want to do it now, you can do it afterwards. You can do it tomorrow. But it's a good cause. I think the latest number we had, unfortunately, the page doesn't show what's been raised. The number we got late this afternoon was almost $250, like $236, which will be matching. So we're hoping to get all the way up at least to that $1,000 and support the Central Ohio, the Mid-Ohio Food Collective. So upcoming events, we still roughly think we know what we're going to do. We know what dates there are. You can always, all the dates we're planning to have events. We don't know if or when this year we will be back in person, so we may be doing them virtually as well. That's part of the reason we have Michael tonight is we are being a little bit opportunistic and trying to get some people who are not based in Central Ohio and take advantage of the format. So our next event will be on June 10th. Then we'll have one on July 15th, and we'll announce the topic. That'll come out in email. Will be posted on our website. So hope to see you again. Hopefully one of these nights is like really lousy weather. So the plan for tonight, just to walk through the flow. It's for those who were at the last one. This one is a little bit different, but also pretty similar. So I'll be done here momentarily. We'll then hand it over to our speaker, who has about a 30-minute presentation. We'll do some Q&A. We'll talk about the logistics of that in a minute. We'll then do our door prize. So we've shifted up the way we're doing the door prize so that it won't be quite as clunky and awkward as it was last time. But pretty exciting little virtual door prizes. And then we're going to use this feature of Zoom called breakout rooms. So the idea is, just as some of us were able to kind of chat and hang out as we were getting ready to start the event, we'll split up and we'll try to get 4 to 6 people into individual breakout rooms. You're kind of randomly assigned to a breakout room. It's really just an opportunity to just hang out, to chat with people just like you were in person in a smaller group. You don't have to stick around. If you've had enough and you're super uncomfortable, drop out at any time. We appreciate you coming and helping our little community continue along. We'll then come back to this main room, and then we'll do it again. So you'll have kind of opportunities to have 2 sort of brief hangout, chat with other people, discussions, or actually chat with Michael, and then we'll wrap up. So hopefully overall we're kind of out, in an hour and 15 minutes. So with that, I'm going to hand the reins over to Michael Helbling. Just from the logistics perspective, this is a slightly outdated screen capture, but if you mute yourself so you're not flushing toilets in the background or somebody else isn't, we'll use the chat window. So if you have any questions, just put them in. We're going to have Michael kind of not need to worry about watching the chat. There will be Q&A at the end. We will be logging the questions as people put them in chat. So then we'll kind of facilitate reading those out to him so we can have a 5 to 15 minute Q&A session at the end. So with that, it is my distinct pleasure to hand over the microphone to Michael Helbling, who is the president and owner of AJL Analytics based in Atlanta. He has over 15 years of experience in digital analytics. He actually has made it to the occasional Columbus Web Analytics Wednesday back in the day when he lived in Cleveland. He's worked both client side at Lands End as well as agency side at Rosetta and Search Discovery. He's on the board of the Digital Analytics Association, and he is the co-host of the most highly rated explicit analytics podcast, the Digital Analytics Power Hour. He's my friend. He's my co-host. He's the worst manager I ever had. I'm pretty sure he can dish out or give back what I'm dishing out. He's the analytics yin to my analytics yang. He is Michael Helbling. So Michael, take it away.
Okay, awesome. All right, I'm trying out technology. So I believe we've got my video and my picture in picture so that you can still see my face while I present. So if you click on the cancel the spotlight video, the only way it'll get me back is if you go up to the right corner and pin my video stream again so you can see the slides. So I won't share through the normal means, but that way I can still emote and talk to you at the same time. Hi, it's a real pleasure to be here, and I still mourn the fact that I can't be in person in Columbus at this event because it's awesome, and I've always had such an amazing time whenever I get to hang out in Columbus with the web analytics or digital analytics community there. So a lot of fondness for Ohio generally, and certainly the Columbus Web Analytics Wednesday crew specifically. All right. So topic, I'm going to talk about emotionally intelligent analysts. So let's jump into it. So what am I talking about? Well, so basically, here's what we're trying to do as analysts. We're trying to take data these charts and graphs, and we're trying to move it in an orderly fashion into people's heads, right? So just a really vast oversimplification of the process. It's basically taking data and trying to get people to do things with it. And it's not often easy. And, we work really hard at it. We struggle to, first just get the data, connect it to our Google Tag Manager or Adobe Analytics or Mixpanel or whatever tool we use, get it set up right, get the data flowing through it right. We then go into a ton of work to transform that data into information, whether that be a dashboard or a report. And then we actually pull additional data to perform analysis, and we bring that analysis back to business stakeholders to ask and make recommendations or form hypotheses. And we spend a lot of time thinking hard about how do I present this the best possible way? And yet, all too often, all of that hard work and all of that effort leads to people disagreeing with us, all of our opinions being discounted or ignored, and sometimes even disparaged. It's not like this works super well in practice in a lot of places. And then the times that it does, you definitely remember. And those are probably some of my fondest memories as an analyst, or when it's been a really positive experience. But I know from working many, many years in the industry that it's not just me that struggles with this, because Tim Wilson, in case you didn't know, is the quintessential analyst. And he also will share frustrations with these kinds of things. And so, so Tim, just agreeing with one finger up there. So that's exactly what I'm talking about. So why is that? So, well, it's because we're always asking people to change. We're always asking people to do something different. If you think about it, analytics is basically, we're trying to do two things. We're trying to get people to maybe stop doing bad things, right? Use data to show you where something's wrong and let's do something different, or expand and grow good things. So here's something that's moving along in a positive direction. Let's build it up and do things. But we're always asking people to go a little further, learn a little more, integrate more information. And apparently that's not easy to do. Here I am presenting to you virtually for an event, right? So we've all gone through some pretty significant change. Luckily, there's some science that can help. So I want to talk a little bit about how our brains work. Not a lot, but a little, because I only have 30 minutes and this presentation was longer than the first iteration, which I've changed it up a little bit just for Columbus Web Analytics Wednesday. So I like the phrase I like to use to try to be friendly to my own mind is that our brains have evolved to protect us from ourselves. And what that ends up doing is it tries to shield us from things that we're not going to do well with, like, for instance, change, things that make us afraid, those kinds of things. And so, a lot of our brain, I don't understand, I'm not an evolutionary biologist or anything like that, but a lot of the evolution of how our brain works, I mean, there's some stuff in there that came from a really, really long time ago where we didn't have Zoom and all of our Web Analytics Wednesdays were beside a fire with spears and saber-toothed tigers and what have you. And our reaction to a noise in the night was not to ask someone to mute their phone, it was to wonder whether a big animal was coming out of the woods to eat us. And so we take that same brain and we put it in a modern business context, and unfortunately, it does weird things. So it's kind of interesting. There's a lot of science on this. So it's one thing that stands out is the brain is definitely made more for fit than it is for truth. It's just explained a lot by how memory works and things like that. We kind of take things like memory and we adjust it to, and that's why we have faulty memories and things like that. But it also then takes us and it forces us to sort of create narratives for like how we think of the world, and then we kind of slot things in And again, this is just our brain doing its thing, trying to help us out. But it makes us into not rational decision makers. And so our natural state, and then you can understand this just by looking at bias, right? So if we look at all the different kinds of bias that exist, these are all good examples of sort of how our brain naturally flows forward. And so a lot of the work of Kahneman and Tversky, who did a bunch of psychological experiments that demonstrated this back in the 70s, and kind of pioneered kind of a whole new field out of that, shows us that our brains and the way that we think, we're just not, we will make the same kinds of mistakes with the same kinds of data as other people without working through some of those preconceived notions and challenges. And I like to use the example of how people think today about machine learning and AI as an example in the real world of how we're not that sophisticated or rational when it comes to decision making, because we all think, or not we all think, but everybody here understands the potential of machine learning and AI, but just go like one step removed, and the people you work with next to you or something like that, or the marketing team over there or whatever, like start talking about machine learning and AI, and you start going in these really weird directions of expectation of what it will do for us, much like other new technologies or capabilities of the past, like microsites, for instance, back in 2008. Those were dark times. Anyway, so that's the brain. We also love to connect things to what we know. So if I understand something with a great deal of ease or facility, I really like that thing, and I give it more validity naturally. So I will just naturally do that. There's a really interesting story where they just studied the name of a person at this big law firm, and looked at career trajectory based on name and preference and things like that. And basically, if your name was hard to pronounce, you did worse in your career than if your name was easy to pronounce. And it's just because, well, that we like something we get easily. And so if I struggle with your last name, if I don't address that in my head, I will make the mistake of not giving you enough credit. Whereas if your last name is really easy, and if you just look at just the difference between Tim Wilson and Michael Helbling, just contrast our two careers. Wilson's super easy to say. No, I'm just kidding. That's a joke. Anyway, but those kinds of things do exist. So unchecked, our brain is kind of doing this fancy footwork on us that can kind of get us a little messed up. And also, if it's a personal or local connection, then we also tend to like it or believe in its validity more. And I'm going to even use that to my advantage this evening, so later on. But there was actually a really interesting study done by a university in Pennsylvania, and they went out and they showed a bunch of data visualizations to a group of people in rural Pennsylvania, and all the way from like people at truck drivers and people at a farmer's market all the way up into the college level. And they were just trying to figure out, as they showed these to people, which one did people pick out as the best visualization of data. And what they noticed was that it was not, there was no emergent continuity, right? It just was all over the place. But as they delved deeper into why people chose those things, it had to do with, oh, well, this shows, this trends in alcoholism, and my uncle was an alcoholic, so I like this one more. Or this one was from my local newspaper as opposed to this one was from the New York Times, so I trusted this one more, liked it more. And we all know, like, the big newspapers, New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, I mean, they put a lot of work and money into data visualization, and they do typically a much better job than, say, some of your local publications. Not to say local publications don't do a great job, but, then there's obviously some outliers there as well that get passed around on Twitter from time to time of visualizations that just frankly are beyond the pale. But it's very interesting to see that the research showed that people tended to hone in on what matched their own experience and what was local to them. And so these are the kinds of things that are happening. The other thing is we love stories, and actually a normal, healthy person tends to make themselves the hero of their own story, and they will gather facts and things like that and mush them into uh, a line that supports their own narrative. And so they'll kind of like, well, I'm the protagonist and I'm trying to do this, and now I'm going to take this fact, and because it fits my story of who I'm trying to be, then I will take this and make it my own and do that. And so as analysts, when we're trying to be objective and let people see the whole thing, you sometimes will see someone cherry pick a data point and run with it because it matches their narrative, right? And so it's interesting because as in doing some of this research, the most successful story type in Hollywood is one called The Man in a Hole. And it basically has a story pattern that goes like, someone's going along, something really bad happens, they overcome a bunch of things, and then they emerge victorious at the end. So The Godfather is an example of one of those movies that is probably the most well known for this, but also Shawshank Redemption, The Matrix, A League of Their Own. There's tons and tons of examples of this story type. So as you go to I don't know, will we ever go to the movies again? But as you watch movies on Amazon Prime and Netflix and whatever ways that they'll make for us to watch movies together in a social setting in the future, you will now notice how often that story type emerges of this pattern. So again, you can also match that back to, if I know that's true, then I can also align my analysis to that type of idea. It's not too hard to craft a man in a hole narrative right now, actually. Our business is going along fine, then coronavirus happened, and now we're clawing our way out of it. And here's the important things our company needs to do based on my analysis to overcome some of the challenges we face as a business, or, whatever the case may be. Non sequitur. I always put one of these in my presentations. So Tim Wilson does such a great job with all of these things. And that is why I like to call him the quintessential analyst. He knew I was going to do this when he invited me. It's just part of it. It's in my rider. I have no, I'm just kidding. Anyways, Tim's an awesome guy. Notice the little pie chart in the background. That was a beautiful touch made by one of my former coworkers at Search Discovery. So yeah, great piece of work. Thanks, Tim. But you can learn a lot from Tim, even though he doesn't like to talk about emotional intelligence and things like that very much. He is quite good at it. All right, so we are going to talk about emotional intelligence. This is the point at which Tim would say something like, do your fucking job, like as the way to do that. I asked him before, like, do people swear on these Web Analytics Wednesdays? He's like, read the room. I was like, I'm going to go for it. So I'm sorry to offend. Hopefully your kids are not listening. And, but sort of the podcast is the way it is. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about it. So the first thing I want to talk about is this concept of soft skills. I did some digging. I've really grown to not enjoy the term soft skills, primarily because it just seems like maybe it's not as good as hard skills in certain senses. And it's pretty important to have both skills. You need hard skills, like, quantitative skills, but you need the ability to work with people and those kinds of things. And I think we let ourselves get fooled into thinking that there's nothing you can really do about soft skills sometimes. And so you kind of just either feel like you have it or you don't. But actually, the term came from the US military. And so I guess post the Korean War, they were trying to figure out, how to differentiate between driving a tank, maybe, and knowing the topography of a hill on a map. I don't know, but there was just different skills, and they were trying to rank them together, or being a good commander of a company. I'm not sure exactly, but basically they started to emerge with hard skill, soft skill. And so what I always tell people is, if you support the military industrial complex, by all means, keep using soft skills, but I do think there are better words or better ways we can talk about these skills that don't have that kind of baggage. But I always say it this way. It's sort of like, okay, well, the hard skill is knowing maybe how to use a sword. The soft skill is knowing when to, right? So, knowing Excel and knowing when to use Excel. Some people would say never, but Tim and I disagree. We love Excel still, or Google Sheets or whatever, but there are better tools now. Anyway, so moving on to emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence is also one of these newer concepts. It has come along, and there's been quite a bit more work done on it. A lot of research has gone into understanding this. And in the business context, they've started to observe that people who have high emotional intelligence tend to start performing at higher and higher levels than people who don't. And so now it's becoming a focus for people, like, oh, we've got to build our emotional intelligence. Well, okay, what exactly does that mean? And what do I do about it? And it's also a little tricky because we have IQ as a concept, and we kind of view IQ as more of a static concept. Like our IQ is kind of what it is. You can move it around a little bit, but you're kind of, I don't know IQ and the science behind it that much, but like you're kind of where you're going to be. You're that kind of smart. Emotional intelligence, you can push this thing all over the place. And so it's really something to develop. So again, words being tricky things, we kind of have maybe used these words as we started to develop some of these concepts to kind of put it in people's minds that, well, like IQ, EQ, or emotional intelligence is not something I can actually modify. But actually it has, in the way that I got tested on it, and I still like the design of it, sort of these component elements. So first is self-awareness. So how aware am I of how I'm feeling right now? I'm a little nervous. I'm a little excited. I'm a little tired, and I'm back to nervous again. I'm still a little nervous, but that's my own emotional awareness, what I'm feeling right now. And I don't know, I could go on and on, but sort of like, okay, well, knowing what I'm feeling, that's a good first step. Then the next is self-regulation. Well, what are you going to do about how you're feeling? Well, I probably still need to keep going and finish the presentation and maybe not talk about how I'm feeling in the middle of my presentation, but I was doing it as an example. But so I regulate, okay, well, don't show your nervousness. Try to bring your energy up so people don't see that you're so tired. So I'm trying to regulate how I'm feeling so that, we can make an enjoyable experience here for everybody attending. And then that's on the personal side. Oh, and the other part of that is motivation. So, what is it intrinsically that I do what I do? And so why did I show up here to present a topic like this? And it's mostly because Tim asked, and also because I really like talking to people about analytics and about things that matter to analysts from my perspective. And so I leaped at the chance to get that opportunity with the people from Columbus, who I think run one of the best Web Analytics Wednesdays in the nation and have for now 11 years, which blows my mind, actually, Tim. And then we move to the other side of the equation, which is that was all our own stuff, intrapersonal. And now we're going to talk about interpersonal. And so the first part of that is empathy. So that's basically our ability to tell what others are feeling and being able to react to that in a healthy way. So remember, what is my feeling? It's like, well, maybe I make some assumptions with empathy that maybe a lot of you are feeling a little tired. Maybe this format is not the most comfortable, and you're reading more and more about Zoom fatigue. And so being on one more video call after a whole day of video calls just even feels maybe even a little, so I'm trying to be aware of that. We call that sometimes reading the room or something like that. But if you're in a one-on-one conversation, active listening, there's all these different tactics we use to be able to understand people and display empathy. And then social skills. And what we really mean by that is our ability to kind of provide influence to others to guide them towards outcomes that are positive in a combined fashion. So in a corporate setting, It's like, hey, rally the team, let's get together, we can do this. And we understand people's emotions and are able to pull that into and create positive outcomes with the results. And so if we're asking people to change as analysts, it sounds like we need to know how we feel, regulate that effectively, understand our own motivation, build empathy across our stakeholder set, and then use our social skills to influence the outcomes in a way that will be positive for our companies. And maybe even now it's more crucial than ever. Well, I started writing the subject line to an email. No, I'm just kidding. I just wanted to tie this into coronavirus. So I was like, oh, no, not that one. During this unprecedented, okay, not that one. Okay, as we adjust. Okay, so no, I only do that because I wanted to bring you an example of something I noticed and actually think is pretty phenomenal, that it actually ties right into Ohio, in Columbus, Ohio. And that, of course, is Dr. Amy Acton. So apparently she's the director of the Board of Health. I don't know the exact name of the department, but anyway, she's the main medical person who has been guiding the state of Ohio through the coronavirus with the daily briefings and updates. And she's been leading the way in this. And actually doing such a phenomenal job, she has gained national attention for how she has done this. Also, just notice, stakeholder on their phone, typical analyst situation we're dealing with. And yeah, Dr. Amy for president, I can fully support that hashtag. But anyway, so the New York Times actually did a little video about her, and I actually have the link, and I took some screenshots because I want to talk to you a little bit about what Dr. Acton has done that actually relates exactly to this topic, and what we can learn from how she has managed through this crisis at her level and sort of apply it a little bit ourselves. And even it's interesting, as I was sort of preparing this, Maria, my wife, came through my office and we were talking, and she's like, oh, Dr. Acton. So she knows about her too. This is just someone who's, and we live in Georgia, and we lead the nation in other ways, but not necessarily sometimes with our decision making and some of the cool things that is happening in Ohio. Anyway, so the first thing is acknowledging where people are at. So she's doing this amazing job of both acknowledging her own emotions and acknowledging other people's emotions. So I think that's so crucial, is letting people know, I do see and understand, I want you to feel seen. That's super important whenever you're talking to anybody. So if you're thinking about it from an analytics perspective, the stress of doing the job of, whoever you're trying to influence, the chief marketing officer, let's say, and we're going to go in with analytics and data that shows them they should be doing something different. Acknowledge the things that are happening for them and make sure they understand that you understand what's going on for them, the pressure they're under, the things they need to report on, all those different things. Because in doing so, you can help build significant trust with them. The next thing is she demonstrated a lot of vulnerability. She said, I don't know, to a lot of things. She said, I don't know when we'll reopen and those kinds of things. And so just demonstrating vulnerability. She isn't trying to be 100% right all the time. There is someone in our country right now who does try to be 100% right all the time, and their press briefings go a little less well at the national level. I'm not trying to be political. It just seems like there's a little more struggle in terms of that, when you can't be a little bit vulnerable and admit that maybe you did something wrong or that you do take responsibility for certain things. And then she's really honest. She's really direct and honest. She trusts people with the truth. So she says, this is how it's got to be. It's got to be this way. You have to do this. You got to believe it. And by doing all that work up front, by acknowledging where we're at, by being vulnerable herself and saying, this is what I'm going through too, people can connect with her emotion. Because you know that a little phrase when you're interviewing for a job, it's like, people don't hire a resume, they hire a person. People hire people. It's because you connect with that person. That's what Dr. Acton is doing. She's connecting on a personal level with her audience by doing that. And that gives her the right to say things that are very true and very blunt. This is what we've got to do. Anyway, and then she empowers people to make the change. We can do this. And apparently there's even like a whole t-shirt thing. I think Ohio's really does a great job with t-shirts just generally. I grew up in the Cleveland area, a lot of t-shirts around sporting events and things like that. But she lets people know, like, hey, not all heroes wear capes, but you can do it. You can do this. We can flatten the curve together. So she guides people through with these things and then empowers them to take the change that she knows is necessary for, I guess in this case, our survival in a certain sense, or at least the survival of some of our loved ones. And it has results. My video is obscuring the Michigan number, but you don't really care. It's way bigger. It's over 30,000, 3,789. But, you know, I thought the Ohio to Michigan comparison would probably do well in this audience. So, you know, the Ohio State University being where it is. And so, you know, that's something I saw recently. And actually, you could probably save a 30-minute presentation if you went to the New York Times website and just watched that video. Everything I've talked about up to this point, she demonstrates. The New York Times does an amazing job encapsulating. So with your little screen grabby tool, go grab this link. You may hear my dog barking in the background. We have an agreement that they don't bark from 9 to 5, but after 7 p.m., no pets. So I apologize for that. But anyways, I highly recommend spending the 5 minutes to watch that video. It is a phenomenal analysis of one of the people. Yeah, I think we can post the link in chat, and I'll try to do that as soon as we wrap up here. Oh, perfect. Somebody found it. Yay for Google. Thank you. Thank you. It's such a great example of this process that I just described. And so just to recap that, she was leveraging self-awareness and her emotional intelligence to first acknowledge others, to display vulnerability, trust people with the truth, and then using all of that to empower people to change. And so by leveraging her emotional intelligence, her own self-awareness, her own self-regulation and motivation, combined with her empathy for others, she was able to influence positive outcomes in the state of Ohio around coronavirus. And so it's an excellent example of this in practice, which is why I liked it so much. So there's a way to build a little bit of empathy. So like, I'd like for all of us to get good at that. I could go more into self-awareness and self-regulation, but I only have 30 minutes, so I'm going to talk about empathy a little more. And so there's a little exercise called the 6-hat method. And basically, there's some researchers. There's a book by a guy named Edward de Bono called The 6 Thinking Hats. And basically, it sort of gives everybody a hat to wear. And we all sort of have a default hat. And the idea of the book is basically to help put you in a position to work through other perspectives by kind of putting on each hat. So, but we all kind of start from one of them. But the idea is to basically work through the blue hat about processing control, black hat, why won't this work? What are the negatives? What are the risks? The red hat, you know, the emotional response. We can't do that. That'll alienate our customers. The green hat, creativity and ideation. The white hat, focus on the data that's available and the hard information. Hey, yeah, it sounds like maybe some of us. And then the yellow hat, which is optimism about what's possible and the benefits of the decision. And so whenever you walk into a room and you're going to present information to others, a good thing to do is just to sit through and keep track of who kind of expresses ideas or thoughts in their natural state from kind of which vantage point, and start to understand how do they normally do that. And we can kind of do that to then help ourselves migrate our perspective towards theirs so that we are better able to empathize and see from their point of view. One thing I did as an analyst that I thought was actually one of the most durable and useful things, and I always recommend it, is every analysis we ever presented to leadership, we did a pre-session where as a team, we looked at it together and sort of poked holes in it together. This simply does a couple of things. One, it makes sure that you get rid of bad typos and those kinds of things and little math errors before you ever go upstairs with it, so you keep your credibility strong. The other thing it does is it brings multiple perspectives, and so that when you're looking at it, you can actually help bring and shift the perspectives around. So if you use this method over time, you start to be able to understand the hats that people use, and you can start to leverage that in how you tell stories or make recommendations to others. All right, so we're going to talk about decisions a little bit, because I think if we're asking people to change, we should understand how that process works. So here's one that I like. So it's over decision process view, and this I stole from a professor at the University of Baltimore named Hussein Arsham. So, you know, the first thing we always establish when we want to make a decision is, well, where are we headed? This is also helpful sometimes when you're in one of those meetings where these things are not clear. You can be that cool person and be like, well, let's talk about the goal, but do so with a lot of empathy, of course. And then next up, we want to lay out our uncontrollable inputs, because at my little company, I have all kinds of goals. There are certain things I cannot control. I talked to a lot of my friends about March 9th, because March 9th was my day of existential dread of, oh no, what have I done? Starting a company right before a pandemic hits our country. But then after March 9th, I stopped worrying about that. It's out of my control. I moved it out of my decision process view, and I started working through the other pieces. So, okay, what have I got? What are my resources and abilities? And so on and so forth. So things are out of our control. Competitors, we can't normally control our competitors. We can't normally control what Amazon is doing if we sell online or those kinds of things. And then we go and we list, well, what do we got? What are our resources and capabilities? Well, we got this data. We've got the ability to analyze this data. Hey, Tim Wilson knows R. Let's have him, you know, see if he can find anything using his R skills, or, you know, whatever that is. You can tell I'm very conversant with the data engineering and data science. Then after you do that, you start laying out, well, what choices do we have available to us? Like, what things make rational sense? Hey, you know what? Our website conversion rate is down. I've got a brilliant idea. Let's make a new website. Okay, not a good first thing in choices. Okay, let's just fix our checkout flow, or fix, hey, we keep asking for everybody's phone number right at the beginning. Like when I registered for a Digital Analytics Association event, of which I'm on the board, so I'm allowed to say things that help us improve. And they wanted my phone number before they would let me finish a registration for a virtual event coming up in a couple weeks. And I was like, you don't need my phone number. But I put it in anyways, because I know, you know, that they're not going to use it for anything terrible. But it's a good example, right? Of just, hey, we could make a choice to not include that in registration or not make it mandatory. Then we go through, we understand our interactions. We analyze and make hypotheses about when these things come together, our capabilities and our available choices, what possible outcomes could occur. And we kind of then help us rank our choices in sort of optimal ways. And then we go and we take an action with step 6. So that's kind of a decision process view. And so I like this because it kind of helps us understand what's happening when you're trying to take a meeting and ask people to change some stuff. You're asking them to go through this process. So as you do analysis or present your ideas, this is probably where you want to make sure you've got some sort of answer to most of these questions, if not directly in your presentation, or at least in your back pocket ready to talk about. So what does make a good decision maker? Well, apparently the state of Ohio makes good decisions because you've done a great job flattening the curve. I mean, we just talked about Dr. Acton and the phenomenal job she did, but everyone else had to agree to those decisions and go along with all the policies and things like that. But let's talk through some of these things, because I think this is a good list. And actually, as you read through it, see if you can see markers for people who actually have pretty strong emotional intelligence. So the first is having a high tolerance for ambiguity. Yeah, all of us need a high tolerance for ambiguity, especially right now. The stress we've all felt over the last 2 months is literally our ability to handle the ambiguous stretch to maybe past its normal limit. And it's okay to say so. I just use certain days, it felt like in late March, early April, when it was really rough out there. It felt like we couldn't barely take it at all, like some days. And then somehow we found our, I hate the new normal, but that's kind of where we live now. Also, having a well-ordered sense of priorities. So how do we have a good sense of prioritization? Being a good listener. So again, that's a skill that takes empathy. Always building consensus around a decision. So your social influence, you're using your social skills. Avoiding stereotypes, remaining resilient with feedback. So self-regulation. So sometimes I get news I don't like and it puts me in a bad place, but I still show up and do what I got to do. It's me having self-awareness and self-regulation. Being comfortable with both soft and hard input. So again, think about the 6 hats and where you might get input from. Maybe I don't feel good about this choice, or the numbers show we shouldn't be going down this path. Both of those things have potential merit to them, and it's good to understand and be able to deal with both. Being realistic about cost and difficulty. So I don't know if that's got any like emotional intelligence, but certainly as analysts, we get excited about things and sometimes it's not possible to do them. So we gotta be realistic. Okay, let's synthesize. This slide in this picture is not a picture of Valerie Kroll, who's one of the most delightful people in the digital analytics community, but it always reminds me of her. And so every time I see this slide, it makes me smile. If you don't know who Valerie Kroll is, you will hopefully see her speak at a conference any day soon as we go back to conferences. She's awesome, and also works with Tim Wilson and others over at Search Discovery. Oh, and she spoke at a Columbus Web Analytics Wednesday, so you have maybe had a chance to meet her. All right, so by understanding decision-making, the brain, and emotional intelligence, and we put them in context of our own capabilities and skills as analysts, we unlock capabilities that maximize the value of all of our analysis skills and the hard work we do to actually get data, put it in the right format, and bring it as decisions and change to our organizations. So thank you, and keep analyzing. All right, I'm Michael Helbling. Here's some contact info for me. And you can easily find me on the Measure Slack. Also, I share co-host duties with Tim Wilson and Mo Kiss on the Digital Analytics Power Hour. And then lastly, just want to wrap up that if you haven't already, I'm just thrilled and delighted that the community is rallying around those in need at the Mid-Ohio Food Collective, and that the Web Analyst Wednesday is matching contributions. So if you have the ability to contribute, I think that's a pretty amazing thing. So thank you all so much for having me, and we can do some Q&A, although I probably spent a little more time than I was supposed to.
That's all expected.
Right.
Are you going to go around the horn, do last calls?
That's the part that gets me, Tim, because it's on a Zoom. So anyway, sorry.
We can all see if we can find the reactions button and give them a round of applause through the magic of Zoom. I cheated.
Hey, Tim, can you pull up the slide that shows how people can donate again?
Yes.
That would be good. Oh, and somebody posted the link in the Slack chat. I mean, in the chat as well. Yeah.
Jason, look at that. Okay, we'll do that instead of asking me to navigate. So there was active commentary going on in the chat. I don't think I saw any questions other than what was life before Google. I have one question, what is my default hat?
I am not prepared to assess people in real time, Tim.
That's what you said. You'd walk into a room and you would.
I still need to have a few more meetings with you before I'm able to determine which hat is your default. You're a man of many hats.
So we've got one question in the chat. I actually had a real question teed up in my head that I wasn't gonna, so with the Dr. Acton example, she is kind of inherently in a position of authority. So she's kind of an authority figure. So doing all of that, I think you kind of implied if you're in a position of authority, you can further build that credibility or you can kind of undermine it. A lot of times analysts are not in that position. It's really hard to say, like, expressing vulnerability as an analyst when there's an expectation that you kind of know everything. So do you have any thoughts about going into a room and doing that, communicating, and how expressing vulnerability when you're supposed to have the answers because you have the keys to the data?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And actually the answer again can come from Dr. Acton and her life, because of my understanding is she came from a very disadvantaged background and rose up to becoming who she is today by growing and displaying the leadership skills that she displayed in that context. So in a lot of ways, it's a little trite to say so, but in a certain sense, there's this phrase, leaders lead. And the kind of the other piece of that is you don't have to be a leader to provide leadership. And so all of these things don't require you to be the leader to be able to provide that influence. In terms of acknowledging others, and you can actually do it from a leadership position and it looks great. And you can also do it from not being a leader. So I don't think you're particularly limited. In some cases you will, people, I'll put it this way. It's not very often that someone comes up to you and says, hey, we're in a rough spot. Can you lead our company with your analytics through these trying times? Like, that's not going to happen. However, you can say, hey, I understand that we are, we've seen some big shifts in our business or whatever. And maybe it's positive, like, hey, online ordering is up 500% because that's the only way that people can order from us now. And so what can we do about that? But the point is like, there may be negatives. So you say, I understand, acknowledge where we're at, do that process, and you can do that from anywhere. So yeah, my sense is that I don't believe that her being in a leadership position was really that impactful. And I just compare and contrast other leaders at that point, right, that aren't displaying those capabilities. I mean, heck, in the state of Georgia, we were halfway into this thing when we suddenly found out the governor of our state had no idea that asymptomatic people could spread the disease. Oh, that was a rough day, and I wanted to move, and yeah, it's not good. So anyways.
Okay. So now we've got a couple questions.
Excellent.
You have book recommendations on this?
I do. So, atypically, there are books about emotional intelligence itself, and they tended to be a little academic. And so I might actually take you a different direction. So for instance, where I found out about that New York Times video about Dr. Amy Acton was from Nancy Duarte, who is the principal at a company called Duarte.com, and she wrote a book called Data Stories. It's on my shelf back there, Data Story. And I have more and more found the content that their company is producing to be extremely relevant and useful. I also would say that I am a very big fan of Brene Brown and the books that she's written. Specifically, I think her most recent book is called Daring to Lead, something like that. So I think both of those are good. There are also books by the people that came up with emotional intelligence. I want to say the better of the two is called Focus by, I think, Daniel Goleman, Goleman, I believe. I might be getting that wrong, but those three books I would say are great for this kind of stuff. Some a little tangential, but some very connected.
Okay, lightning round on the questions. We got more questions. How do we keep our employees or colleagues engaged in the work when we don't see our business partners changing behavior when showing them the trends?
Yeah, this is why that harsh slide at the beginning with those red and blue juxtaposed colors, the frustration, the irritability that comes from delivering insight and then not seeing or getting any impactful change to happen as a result of that? I don't have good answers. I am a consultant today because I struggle to have the patience to deal with business stakeholders over significant periods of time. So if I'm a consultant, then I can end my engagement and go away. If I work for them, I got to show up in the next meeting and bemoan the fact that we haven't done anything with this data. So I'm not telling this to you out of position of having figured that kind of stuff out. That being said, caring for each other, going back through that process, acknowledge what we all see. Hey guys, it's rough. I know we're not getting through to some people, but let's keep trying. Let's try to refocus our efforts. And now suddenly you're helping motivate each other to take that next action. And so using emotional intelligence can help you through a system or a time like that as well.
Okay, one more from another out-of-towner. Playing the role as both a consultant, a business owner, and someone highly passionate about analytics, how do you balance all those hats? Many times those are held by a few. This may also help those in internal roles where data can be political.
Yes. So I get told that I need to focus more. And this is an excellent example because this is a topic area where I'm extremely passionate and I like to learn about, but as I don't sell this kind of work to companies typically because I don't work in the area of like human resources and those kinds of things. And that's where if you go into a corporate environment and say, hey, let's use emotional intelligence, they're like, HR's that way. And it's like, well, no, I mean analytics. And I think we're a few years away from it kind of joining hand in hand, but this is why I want to talk about it now. So I don't, again, have really great answers there, except that if you have a lot of passion for those topics and you love them, don't be afraid to show it. I think sometimes that your passion for something helps other people get behind it. And then as far as balancing, well, it's just a practical matter of, more of the self-regulatory nature of, well, where's my time best spent, right? So how do I balance, getting that proposal out the door versus, prepping for my talk about, emotional intelligence and analytics that I'm really excited about. So, yeah.
Awesome. All right. So we're actually reasonably on time. So I guess say everybody give Michael a round of applause. There is the little reaction button, or you can, there you go. Find that. Know that we'll insert sound effects later of the cheering, adoring fans. But Michael, thank you for coming. And he is going to be sticking around. So I'm going to stop the recording and then we'll move into kind of the stuff that would make no sense to be on a recording. But there are still opportunities to just chat with Michael directly. But thank you, Michael.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.